not gonna fit.
It won't?
Put in my spooky hand, it fell!
Put it in. Okay. Hi honeys, it's me Megan and welcome back to my spooky channel where I'm here to satisfy all of your spooky needs. As I mentioned before, my whole family has always been so fascinated with the paranormal. We have seen so many ghost shows, you name one, we have seen it. We love Ghost Adventures, Paranormal State, Ghost Hunters, now I'm really into BuzzFeed Unsolved. We have posters signed by Zach Bagans, posters signed by the whole team of Paranormal State, and we've always just been such huge fans of the paranormal. One year for Christmas, we even got a ghost hunting kit, and we thought we were ghost hunting experts with our spooky devices in our kit. I actually used to live in a haunted house when my family lived in Pennsylvania for a few years. I mean, kind of our fault that the house was haunted because my siblings and I did play with an Ouija board a lot. But it's all good. I have my holy water that my dad sent me in a care package to always protect me. Thanks, God. Anyways, let's get spooky. So today we will be talking about a place that I have always wanted to go visit. It is at the top of my bucket list. It is the Eastern State Penitentiary. Eastern State Penitentiary is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It was one of the most famous, largest, and most expensive prisons in the world. And it was so important because it was made to model a whole new form of punishment for criminals. And it is also one of the most haunted places in the world. Eastern State Penitentiary opened on October 25th, 1829. Many world leaders at the time believed that crime is the result of our environment, and that solitude would make crime regretful and penitent, or however you say it, hence the word penitentiary. So the design of this prison was made to put all inmates in solitary confinement. There were 253 rooms for 253 prisoners. This was huge because Eastern State Penitentiary was the first jail to introduce solitary confinement. The people who were in charge of building and designing this prison wanted religion to be a huge part of people rebuilding themselves. So they made and designed the prison to be very similar to a Gothic church. So because they wanted religion to be a huge part, inmates only were given a Bible. That was their only possession. In their cell, they each had only one skylight. That was the only light that they got in their room, was that one skylight that was viewed to be the light of God shining down on them. So the way that the prison was set up was around a circle, and there were different cell blocks coming out of the circle. Each cell block was designated for a different group of criminals. And by that, I mean there was a cell block just for murderers, there was a cell block just for burglars, there was a cell block for rapists, a cell block for people who committed any crime with anything to do with money. Each prisoner had their own cell with central heat, running water, a flushing toilet, and the one skylight. And this was huge because in the White House, Andrew Jackson still didn't have running water and still was using heat from burning coals. Next to their cell, there was an outdoor exercise yard, but it was basically their own cage because it was surrounded by a 10-foot wall. 10 feet between them and any chance of human interaction. 10 feet, that's a lot bigger than this, but you get the point. Each prisoner only was allowed to have 1 hour a day outside. With solitary confinement even more, the prisoners could only communicate with the guards through a small feeding hole that they would just slide their food in. And when prisoners were taken out of their cell for whatever reason, they were what they call bagged, where a dark, thick hood was put over their head so they could not see any other prisoner, they could not see the guards, and so they couldn't see their way around the prison, so they wouldn't be able to try and escape. Not interacting with literally anyone, not going outside, not having light, not having anything to do except read a Bible, or they would let them weave sometimes or shoemake, little stuff like that. That drives people insane. A lot of people tried to commit suicide. People were going so crazy and things were getting so messed up that they ended solitary confinement in 1913. But Eastern State Penitentiary did not close until 1971. So in 1913, cells were remodeled and the number of inmates rose from 253 to 1,700. Because solitary confinement ended, people decided to make the guards, the rules, and the wardens even more strict. Warden Smith was considered to be the most strict and most brutal, most harsh, most just awful person to work at this prison. He worked there between the 1920s and the 1930s, And because he was so harsh and brutal, and there was not a lot of laws at the time protecting prisoners, he got away with a lot of torture. This is where things get bad because a lot of people died from the torture devices and the kinds of torture that he came up with. There were 5 different things that he would do to torture inmates. The first one was just starving people. He would just not let them eat for days and days at a time, which a lot of people still died from. The second type of torture was what was called a water bath, where an inmate would be taken outside, would be dunked into a tub of ice cold water, stripped of their clothes, and chained to a wall and left there overnight. And they would only do water baths in the coldest winter months, just to be that extra, as if they weren't suffering enough. So of course, many people froze to death from that. But the torture only gets worse. The next torture technique used was called the mad chair, where people would be strapped in very tightly to a chair in a room all by themselves and left there for days. They would not be given food, and they would just be sitting in their own urine and feces because they were just locked there for such a long period of time. A lot of them would lose such bad circulation that it would take them days and days to recover. A lot of them couldn't walk. Some people were so close to having to get their legs and arms amputated, and some people even did get their legs and arms amputated because their circulation was cut off so badly that it just did not come back. And the next torture technique was something called the hole, which was an underground chamber under cell block 14, where people would be left there with no light and would be given 1 piece of bread and 1 cup of water every other day. There were rats, there were roaches, it was dirty, they never cleaned it, so people were sitting in their own urine, in their own feces, and that of other people too. And they were just left there in the dark for weeks at a time. Lots of inmates tried to commit suicide when they were in the hole because they were just left there for so long. And the worst and most harsh torture technique used was something called the iron gag. And what the iron gag was basically this collar that was put around you with a metal tongue, and they would put it in your mouth and they would put the bar on, and it was attached to chains. And what they would do is they would take the chains and attach them to your wrist, and they would be bound behind your back. Underneath the tongue were a bunch of sharp razors, so anytime you tried to move or do anything, it would cut right into your tongue. A lot of people, of course, would die from bleeding out. So the iron gag would only be given to you if you try to interact with other people. People were so miserable in this prison that they would try to talk to other inmates on purpose just to get the iron gag, just so they could die. Hundreds and hundreds of people died in this prison. They died from diseases, starvation, suicide, from the torture techniques, and some were even murdered. In the 1830s, an inmate disassembled a sewing machine and attacked and killed a guard in his courtyard, exercise yard, outdoor thingy, whatever you want to call it. That's not the point. Anyways, he killed the guard and then went back into his cell and fell asleep. Just peacefully passed out and said, okay, cool. He told investigators that he did this because he thought the guards were trying to poison him. He also told investigators that he remembered hitting him the first time, but after that he doesn't remember anything. Another guard died from being pushed over a railing. The railings were so close to the prison doors that as guards were walking through, inmates could put their hands through and push the guards over the railing and they'd fall down. Wires were installed so then when the guards were pushed over and fell, they didn't fall that far. There were some popular prisoners that were in Eastern State Penitentiary that are worth mentioning. Oh my god, that makes me sound like I'm giving them honorable mention or like an award. No, that's not what I'm doing. Okay, anyways, one of them was... Okay, serious. William Francis Sutton, also known as Slick Willie, was one of the most famous bank robbers in American history and spent 11 years at Eastern State Penitentiary. In 1945, Slick Willie and a few other inmates attempted but failed to escape from Eastern State. They dug a tunnel that went almost 100 feet underground. Another famous inmate that a lot of people have heard of was Al Capone, also known as Scarface. Al Capone was Chicago's most famous and most biggest mobster at the time, and he spent 8 months in Eastern State Penitentiary. He was arrested and put in jail just for being caught carrying a weapon. This was his first prison sentence, but it was a good one for him. He was given all of these luxuries. He had his own cell with his own furniture, he had rugs, he had paintings on the walls, he had books, he had so many different things to do in his cell. It was pretty nice for a prisoner in Eastern State at this time. But to Al Capone, this was not a fun 8 months, because this is when things get spooky. Because it's already been spooky. Al Capone believed that he was being haunted by a man named James or Jimmy Clark, who was a victim in the St. Valentine's Day massacre. Guards said that they would walk past his cell and they would hear him screaming things like, "Leave me alone," or "Go away," or "Stop it, Jimmy." And of course the guards thought that he was hallucinating, but Al Capone swears that he was being haunted. A lot of paranormal investigators have gone to Eastern State Penitentiary over the years. They have caught different things on camera, on their audio devices, and a lot of things have been said through eyewitness testimony, and a lot of people experience these very similar things. These all include extreme temperature fluctuations, people hear screaming, laughing, whispering, different voices, people hear footsteps when no one should be walking near them. People have been touched, they feel something on their back and then they'll turn around and there's absolutely no one near them. People have seen shadows, they've seen faces, they hear banging on different walls, they hear keys jangling. In cell block 12, people have experienced hearing laughter, and as you walk towards it, the laughter gets louder and louder and then slowly turns into screaming. That is terrifying. Oh my god. In cell block 6, people have said that they've seen faces and shadows slide down the walls. Also in cell block 6, people have heard cackling or just this really evil laugh. They've heard it around them, they've heard it whispered in their ear, and people have also heard it in their head. When people walk through Eastern State, they can get this overwhelming feeling of being watched or this overwhelming feeling of dread and sadness. In the rooms and areas where people were tortured by the water baths, people get really cold really fast. They feel chills all over their body. In cell block 4, people say faces just appear in front of them, like there's a face and then they blink and it's just gone. People would see these dark figures, which is assumed to be the murdered guards because these dark figures were in the guard towers and in different places where the guards were the only people allowed there at the time. A lot of paranormal investigators have done EVP sessions. When you see paranormal investigators, they have this little black device, they're talking into it and they're being silent, holding it around and trying to just capture a ghost speaking back to them. And a lot of these recordings, they've heard different things like, "I'm lonely," "I know God," "hungry," and a lot of other different things. That's just so sad to hear all these different things. I mean, people went through so much in this prison, and to believe that their souls and their spirits all trapped there still suffering, that's just really heartbreaking. There was one spooky interaction that has been very huge, and they tell them on tours all over the internet, but it happened to this locksmith named Gary Johnson. Gary was trying to remove a lock from a cell in cell block 4 that has been there for years and years and years, and when he just twisted the lock, he didn't even open the door yet. When he just unlocked it, he felt this overwhelming dark matter and this dark energy, and a lot of people believe that when he unlocked this door that has been locked for years and years, he opened a gateway of some sort, and all the spirits and all the people trapped within this cell just all came out at once. He said he had an out-of-body experience. He saw all these faces on the wall. The walls were melting. He was hearing hundreds and hundreds of screaming and voices, and hundreds of faces were just all around him, and he was just frozen. He could not move. This experience was so horrifying and so vivid and awful for him that he doesn't even talk about it to this day. People have gathered his story from bits and pieces, but he will not come out and talk about it openly because it scares him so much. So there's a lot of individual witness testimonies, and a lot of people share their own personal experiences online, and it's really awesome to read all those. And I was reading one from Margie Kerr. I hope that's how you say it. I don't know. She's a journalist for the New York Times, and she has never seen a ghost before. So she went to Eastern State Penitentiary with a paranormal investigation team that she didn't really know, and I'm going to read to you what she wrote. I'm not going to try to change her words because it's what she wrote, so I'm just going to read it. So she said, "A chill at the base of my neck quickly rippled throughout my body. My shoulders shuddered. I felt warm, relaxed, and yet fully aware of everything around me. I was full of emotion. This was a sensation I had never experienced. I spent the rest of the evening in a trance, following the hunters through the cold, empty, eerie hallways. I had found my ghost story. I thought this was extremely interesting because it wasn't one of those ghost stories you see on TV where a full vivid picture of a human demon looking monster thing is in front of you and all that stuff. This is something very simple and different from that, where she just had this feeling and she was just in this trance and she just knew that it was something from another level, just something deeper trying to communicate with her. And that's why I love the paranormal, because it is not as simple as getting these pictures of orbs and trying to see these shadows and trying to record all these EVPs. It's so much more deeper and meaningful than that. Because if you believe in all this stuff, you believe that there's people trapped everywhere, especially where awful things happen, like at Eastern State Penitentiary. If this is true, there were hundreds and hundreds of souls that went through torture, they went through pain, they suffered mental illness, they suffered illness, just physical illness, and they are all still trapped there. And that is the story of the Eastern State Penitentiary. Eastern State Penitentiary is a very popular tourist attraction. You could go during the day and just look around and read different things about the different prisoners there and what they went through. Or you can go at night, which I am so down for. People are still sharing different stories. People are still experiencing the paranormal there. So if you really, really want to get spooky, then head on over to Philadelphia. Thank you guys so much for watching my video, and I hope you had a really spooky time with this one. Once again, let me know what spooky things you want to see on this channel. A lot of you guys have recommended a lot of awesome things that I'll be looking at in the future, but I want to hear more. So let me know. So please like, subscribe, and I will see you all soon. Bye, honeys! Let's get started.